Hey, good evening, everyone. We're going to start a few minutes late. We're waiting for our board president. He did notify us he's running a few minutes behind, and he does travel quite a bit from his job to get here to run the meeting. So we're going to give him a few minutes to get here on time, or a little bit late.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this evening's meeting to order, our regular board meeting for Tuesday, December 2nd, Chancellorsville Area School Board. Please rise for a pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Thank you. Prior to this evening's meeting, the board did meet in executive session regarding real estate matters. Item 2.03 is approval to adopt tonight's meeting agenda. Motion and second, please.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Haydick, second by Mr. Walker. Questions, comments? I'll add one. Number 13 is new business. That's on this week, and thank you, Chris. This was my fault last week. I blew right over new business at Committee of the Whole last week. So new business be a discussion item only. And then we'll probably continue that. Well, we'll see. May continue then into the next cow and go from there with the process. So we have a motion and second for 2.03 to accept tonight's meeting agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, and so moved. Before we get to 3.01, just another note. I mentioned it last meeting. And this will be our second meeting while we're on video. For those in the audience, when you're at the mic, you can't be seen on the video. So if you wanted to be seen on the video, sorry. And if you didn't want to be seen on the video, congratulations. So with that, 3.01 student government reports.
I'm with Cassius. I'm a student government president. My name is Carly Skoltedi. So I went over the field trip last time, but I'll briefly go over it again if you want to skip to the next slide. On Wednesday, November 13th, 25 Cassius student government members traveled to the state capitol building. They toured the capitol, they met with representatives, and yeah, I already went over this a couple times, so we can just skip this to the next one. Trojan Care. So we came up with a logo, and we're currently meeting with the basketballs. The guy that makes the boys basketball shirts. We're meeting with him in hopes that he can make shirts for us and get them out to the whole community, not just students. So it'll be available to you guys, and we'll have a link. The game is on February 5th, and it's going to be a whiteout. So for the crazies and for the whole stadium. And we're also gonna do 50-50 and get a game license, so it'd be really nice if you guys could put money towards that. And we're gonna do a halftime game, which either, we haven't decided if it's gonna be like a knockout or just a donation for a foul shot. So, that's all. Any questions? Thank you.
When will the shirts be available?
Well, we still have to talk with him to see if we can get them out before or after the New Year's, but sometime around then.
I'd just like to highlight an event that the Cassius girls wrestlers had last week. The first event, having spent many evenings beside the mats for boys wrestling in my earlier years, I enjoyed the opportunity to see the first girls wrestling match, and they're going to do well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And no magnet school report tonight. Okay, 3.02 superintendent's report.
Thanks, Mr. Norcross. I do want to report that the survey that went out last week to wrap up regarding the schools of distinction and facility enhancements was complete. We had 701 participants in the survey, which was pretty good for us. 63% of the respondents strongly agreed or agreed that they had enough information. We had 71% respondents are either very supportive or somewhat supportive of our preferred option 4 that we're going to vote on tonight, with 45% of them being very supportive. About 56% of the respondents watched the presentations online, 17% attended in person. And then also 58% of the respondents have lived in Chambersburg for more than 16 years. Just a fun fact on that one. So I do want to thank everybody for their participation. It's been a somewhat of a long process to get the word out, and I don't know what else we could have done. So I do want to thank everybody for their time, energy, and effort in the process to communicate, certainly publicly, what we were doing with all the staff presentations and forums. I do want to thank all of those who participated in designing what will be more of a culminating vote tonight. You know, it's over 100 staff members have participated, whether it was in a survey, whether it was on a committee, whether it was feedback, working with the architects to work on the feasibility study. You know, the path we've set forward really will lay the groundwork for the next 20 years. I know our schools will be on a path towards distinction, and I keep using that word, schools of distinction. And I also know we're on a path for a one town, one Trojan community. And it's nice to be on that path with you as a community, with you as a staff. You will hear tonight from Kurt Widman about the state of learning in the district on performance. I don't want to steal his thunder, but related to schools of distinction, Hamilton Heights for the second year in the row did win the U.S. News and World Report, award-winning school in the top 40%. And I will say to you, they're approaching a school of distinction. When you do something well for multiple years in a row, that's when you're going to get a status from the school district. So as we clearly define what school of distinction means in a variety of ways, we will start recognizing schools of distinction formally in this room, certainly branding and decorations, bring folks in. So I'm very excited for what Kurt's going to present, and also Hamilton Heights and other success stories that you're going to hear about tonight. And thanks to the Board of Education for your steadfast support, acceptance and tolerance of all the information that comes your way that we've provided to you. And thanks for your engagement as well. You've been very supportive of the team, my staff, myself, and also asking really good questions, and also being an advocate for public education. So I do want to thank you. End of my report.
All right. Go Huskies. All right. President's report. Last week, in a couple minutes while I had the microphone, and mentioned a couple of my goals as board president I'd like to see the board do or achieve or work towards. After the meeting, I was asked about goals, so I thought I'd take the time tonight to repeat those or to reiterate what I said a week ago, because I was asked what they were, or what maybe the vision that I was seeing that and these are just Ed Norcross's thoughts. But since there were 3 of them, and one of them was to brand our investment, and Mr. Bigger has done that in schools of distinction by 2030, which happens to be item 10.01 on tonight's agenda. But it didn't, as Chris said in his earlier comments here just a minute ago, this didn't start just last week. This started many, many months ago, and it has a long ways to go. So, you will hear me say this often, and maybe you'll get sick of me hearing it, which means everyone knows what we're talking about when we say investment in schools of distinction by 2030. That was one of my 3. So since Chris already took that off the list, I thought I'd add another one. No. But one of my other ones from last meeting was a focus on special education. I really think staffing is an area we can make some improvements on. Last year, the administration and the board, we made some great strides in our support services, and have really improved our staffing and our vacancies. This was a comment by the public repeatedly. And I've heard some comments since we did this, and since the results have shown, of everyone's efforts in doing that. Dr. Diller schooled me probably a year ago on the intervention specialist as being a very key part of this, and that was already approved. but I think there's still a lot of work we can do, and it's not going to be easy. And the third item was this, and it's sort of a sister or brother, a sibling, if you will, to the investment in schools of distinction by 2030, and that is revisiting the resolution from 3 years ago with our plus X. It has been +1. I'll use X because we don't know what it'll be this year or future years. So to be generic, I'll call it +X. But it's worded more for capital reserve, which previously, that's what we were focused on. Now that we have, over the next 7 years, $170 million of bond issues coming, we actually, to look at changing that resolution for debt service payments. So since there's only 2 left, the third one I thought I would add, we'll call it 3B, and it goes a little bit with investment, and it's part of our projects. We're going to look at our athletic facilities and a capital campaign. This board, but the school board, previous boards as well, we've often talked about initiating a capital campaign, but it's never gotten much further than just talk. And I think one thing that I've seen in the past year with this board is we get stuff done. We really do. And I think that's something that we can work on. Again, our neighboring districts have done this 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And I think we can pick up and help with that as well for us. So again, they're my 3, 2 old, 1 new thoughts, ideas, goals, Ed Norcross goals that I'd like to see us work towards as a board and as a district. So with that, I'm going to conclude those remarks just with one final. I'd like to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, be safe, have fun, and be prosperous. Thank you. Item 4.01, biannual academic report. Mr. Woodman, please.
Good evening, and thanks for letting me report to you this evening. A little bit different. So before I start the presentation, this is my 4th time talking about data and our academics in our schools. So we're doing a little bit differently tonight. In the past, it's been 45 to 57 slides is what I've seen. And to quote Dr. Long this week, he says, sometimes I felt like I was falling asleep during that presentation. So there you go. Mr. Norcross as well. So I condensed it down to 15, but for those folks that like all those color charts, I did provide them still. The data that supports what I'm speaking to this evening is in some of the packet that you have in front of you. And so I'll look for some feedback since this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. Afterwards, I was asked beforehand, is it okay if we ask questions as you go along? That's fine. Just interrupt me. Maybe Mr. Bigger, if you see someone's hand go up, just say, hey, hold on here a minute. All right, so we're going to get started. As you just heard Mr. Bigger and Mr. Norcross talk about schools of distinction, that really started after Mr. Bigger, and it led right into a group that I led, the CASD Blueprint Committee, where we developed our 6 pillars, and we started to talk about our goals for the district and where we needed to go. A lot of those things that you've seen in his presentations on the building reconfigurations and a lot of things that we've started have come from out of those meetings. So as we head to schools of distinction by 2030, we are looking at target areas. We've already started those. Dr. Long and myself have met with our principals. They have set goals. Basically, our main goal is 10% improvement across the board. So and I'll hit that a little bit later in what that looks like in each division. But they have set goals for 2030, and they've also set goals for each year. And finally, towards the end of the presentation, as you've seen in many of our other reports, we've been comparing ourselves to 10 like school districts, roughly the same size, same demographics. In the middle schools. Our middle schools are great at growth. There's always room for improvement. You can see a little bit later in the packet, the PVAS scores. Dark blue is excellent, and our middle schools traditionally have been excellent. Our kids come in, and the teachers at the middle schools really close those gaps. And then lastly, Keystone performance in literature, Algebra 1, and biology. Moving on to the reading, writing, comprehended by third grade. This is the first time we have ever grade. This is the first time we have ever assessed our kindergartners right when they came in to see where they were and how ready they were for kindergarten. We haven't done that before. The test is one of the assessment that we used is, I think, the front page of the packet that I gave you. And it shows you what we look for. And basically, when it boils down to it, our kindergartners, about 22% of them were ready reading-wise, and 54% were ready in math. So as we look to approve the 4 directors, one of the biggest goals, and if I go back to that CASD, it's our daycares, and really let them know what we're looking for and what they can do to get our kids ready. So our third grade data, that reading and writing that I spoke about before, in the year 22-23, 40% of our kids hit that metric. This year, we did see a 6% increase of students hitting that metric. One thing I want to say, our principals worked hard this summer. They did rearrange some schedules. We did have a young lady speak at the COW. I just want to let you know that none of the recesses were actually shortened to, and I actually checked that school. So I just wanted to let you know that none of the recesses were actually shortened for that schedule. But we have included what I need now time. Our teachers are calling that win time. That's an extra half hour in the day where the kids are met where they are learning and in small groups. Our PVAS growth, and I put 3rd through 8th grade, just not 3rd grade, but really our teachers do a phenomenal job of growing our kids and closing the gaps. So in reading, we have excellent growth. You'll see in the PVAS scores in your packet. Now into the future, I already spoke a little bit about the win time. We have increased intervention. Tonight on the board, part of the agenda, we are adding 4 more interventionists in the elementary, and including also the Dean of Student Affairs in the small schools. About 50% of their time is also going to be spent on intervention. So when you look, that's going to be 7 to 8 or even 9 folks increase doing intervention in elementary. We're piloting Walk to Read. It's heavy in K to 1. We're also starting in 2nd grade in 3 schools where we're doing it. If any of you want to take a trip with me and see that in action, it's phenomenal what's happening in Stevens, Falling Spring, and Fayetteville. We're going to be bringing the other schools on in the fall, and we're preparing to do that right now. And of course, we still need more supports for our most struggling students, whether it's special ed, ESL, or students with the biggest gaps.
Excuse me, Mr. Widman, could you give the acronyms, what they mean, the PVAS, PVASS, what's it stand for? I mean, it's a great time
PVAS
for an acronym.
Thank you. I should have had that written out. Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment. It measures the student growth as well as each individual teacher, so we can see how teachers even do over a 3-year span with students. Of course, we love to see dark blue. We have some teachers that. Even actually, you dig down deep into it, it ranks where they fall in the state. When I was principal, Cam's North, I'd actually go over the PVAS data with each teacher, and we would take a look at how their students performed the year prior and how they're doing over 3 years. So it's great data for our teachers to take a look at.
Thank you very much.
Walk to Read, tell me what that is.
So to go back to your time when you were a principal, it's going to be more like flooding, but it's a systemic flooding where you would walk into the kids are in one classroom. So at Stevens, I was there in the kindergarten classroom. They had 4 different adults at 4 different stations working with students, and they are working on sounds. They're breaking down words. It's basically a flooding model, but they're put into groups based off of their like Acadian scores.
So grouping students for
Yes.
instruction.
Will there
And
be
that's happening every day.
Will there be a specific evaluation of our new open court reading program, or is what we're seeing here reflective of that? What's the plan as far as data relative to that?
We look at our data. We look at our MAP scores, Acadians. We are now starting our 3rd year. The first year we had some growing pains. We expected to see an implementation dip. We didn't see much of an implementation dip that first year. The first year we had about half our schools dipped a little bit. Some of our schools went up, some of the schools stayed the same. When you looked at all the data, it actually stayed the same that first year. Last year it went up a little bit. So we're pretty pleased that we have a resource that is common throughout our whole district. And once again, going back to when our teachers selected that, it was, we had 41 folks that were part of that selection committee. They're very happy with it. The one question I keep getting is there's a lot of assessments on Fridays, so we keep looking at how we can make that better and maybe less assessing times if we can. But we still need to assess to see where the kids are. So I think that's the biggest concern I get from the teachers is the assessments on the Fridays.
I've got a question, Kurt.
Good.
Back to the walk to read. So the people, the adults who are reading, or there are volunteers or?
That's the model. The folks, it's staff members that are leading that. So we have our interventionists that are in the room, the teacher that's in a room, and we have an aide or 2 that are in the room. And the teacher in the classroom, the interventionist, are setting what it should look like each day when they get to that point. So moving on to the middle schools, getting back to the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System.
Go back one, Kurt, you missed math.
Oh, I did I?
Yep.
I must hit it twice, sorry. So math fluency, proficiency by 5th grade. We're pretty happy that we've seen an increase overall in our scores over the last 3 years. We're still using the same resource, Eureka. Our principals have laid out expectations and devoted time, a specific amount of time to math, and also a fluency portion in each one of the classes. We do believe that that has helped. Overall, when you take a look at our PVAS growth, out of the 3 subjects, although our growth in math is still pretty good and above the state average, it's our subject that we're probably growing our students the least right now. And in the future, we also instituted win time for math. We'd love to see more time devoted for our math students because we're spending a lot of time on the reading, which we need to do. The kids need to read first. But we're also exploring Bridges resources at Stevens right now, and we're getting some good feedback from the teachers. I actually have a meeting with Amber Myers, one of our math coaches, on Friday just to talk about how Bridges is going down at Stevens right now. But we are pleased that we're seeing the proficiency go up overall in math over the last 3 years in 5th grade.
Could you explain the Bridges?
It's a resource similar to Eureka. They like the fluency part, the fluency piece, the math facts piece, a little better than the Eureka resource that we have right now. So Bridges is a resource that we're exploring down at Stevens right now.
So it's not something that we've implemented?
No, it's not. The math, K-8 math will be coming up soon on our cycle of resources. So I was asked by the math teachers down at Stevens if they could take, Amber Myers has pretty much been our expert, our elementary math expert that we've had, and she came to Crystal Lautenschlager, Lindsay Breslin, and myself, and asked if they could explore it. So we looked at it, and they're exploring it down there. They're not doing it in every grade. I will say that Amber did tell me that one of the most veteran teachers that normally doesn't like change actually says they like this resource better than what we were using in Eureka. So, moving on to our middle schools. Our goals in our middle schools is that we see growth in ELA, math, and science, closing the gaps when the kids get in 6th grade. Just want to remind you, in middle school, every student is tested with the PSSA in math and ELA, and in 8th grade, they're also tested math, ELA, and science. But both middle schools, I know Mr. Bigger talked a little bit about awards. I'm coming up with the celebrations in a few moments, but both middle schools did make that list for the U.S. News and World Reports for high-performing schools. So we're pretty proud of our middle schools' performance. Their proficiency, when you take a look at that, it's pretty stagnant. That's why we want to see a 10% growth in all subjects. They're growing students, but our proficiency, as you look at the last 3 years, it's pretty much remained pretty close to, a standard deviation. In the future, we're excited about the grade reconfiguration, pulling 6th grade possibly down with 4th through 6th grade. We want to look at related arts offerings, what we offer our students from related arts. We also want, this is our chance to take a look at middle school, and are we going to be more project-based? We're going to do more hands-on, more exploratory. So over the next couple years, as we plan for the grade reconfiguration, we have a lot to think about and a lot possibly to move forward. Once again, at the middle schools, they have a little bit of intervention, but not much. And one area of struggle is, of course, our students, our ESL students, of course, our special ed students that we want to focus on too, and students with the biggest gaps. Keystone performance. The last 3 years, I have Algebra 1. One concern, our growth over the past couple years is starting to dip a little bit at the high school. Now into the future, we do feel that because of Act 158, our students didn't have, when the Keystone was originally put out there, it was said that you needed to pass these. Put out there, it was said that you needed to pass these in order to graduate. So we feel that that will help our proficiency rates, and our SPP scores, and how the communities look at comparing schools across the state. You heard at the Cal from Dr. Long, Brad Ocker, and Sean Stenger about bringing back the Freshman Academy. We're excited about the opportunities that provides as well for our students, and the alignment of schedules for all 3 FCCTC, the CMS, and CASHES will help with a lot of supports and academic supports. And of course, their support for struggling students, as you know, that is why CMS is on school improvement for special ed and ESL, and basically CASHES is on for all of their subgroups. School performance profile. I wanted to list the items that go into the calculation. This is how we're compared with across the state. Your last pages of your packet are a list of all the schools and the 10 school districts that we are comparing ourselves to. And you can see where Chambersburg falls against those 10 school districts. But the school performance profile, they look at their academic achievement on PSSA and Keystone. That's their proficiency and advanced. Closing the achievement gap. How many kids are we actually closing that gap on learning? They look at the Pennsylvania Value-Added Assessment, the academic growth. They look at our attendance rates. They look at our graduation rates. And we get extra credit for advanced achievement on AP exams.
Do all of those hold the same amount of weight whenever they're figuring into the score, or are there some that hold heavier amounts than others?
There are some that hold heavier amounts. Like the achievement is the biggest amount. I would have to take a look. There is a calculation, but they do not all hold the same amount.
Is there any of those, just looking at, with your experience in it, that we struggle with more than others?
That would be the first one for sure.
Okay.
And after COVID, we started to struggle with our habitually truant students, or students with high absentee. We are working hard on that. That's not just a Chambersburg thing. I think that's an every public school thing as well. And of course, attendance is then tied to graduation
Right, to
rate as
everything
well.
else. So if you have an attendance problem, it's safe to say that some of those others are gonna suffer because of that.
Right. So the next slide is a list of our schools and how they performed. We generally, within the state, if you're scoring in the 70s, that's pretty good. If you score in the 80s, I have those highlighted in blue, that's really good. And especially for middle schools or high schools to score in the 80s, that's pretty exceptional. 10 of our 17 schools increased their SPP school scores this year. So I'll let that sit for just a second. As we compare, you see the high school is the lowest at 56.8. As I looked at our 10 comparables, that puts us at 10 out of the 12 high schools. Now CMS is 4th out of the 12 high schools. But when you combine them, it looks much better for us when you combine all of our students. And I'm going to be heading into those slides right now. So our proficiency comparison, when you look at all 10 of the school districts, you add those together, all the schools versus all of our schools, this is pretty tough for you to read. I do have it in the packet so you can read a little easier, but Chambersburg sits a little bit higher in all 3 areas of math, ELA, and science. Actually, science is the biggest gain over the other schools, 76% to 62.5%. When you look at the growth comparison, when they're looking at how students grow, our proficiency was a little higher, so it makes sense that our growth is a little higher as well. And once again, actually ELA is the largest gainer there at 85% to 72% of our non-Chambersburg schools that are in that group of 10 districts. And then when you combine Caches and CMS, our graduation rate is just slightly higher than the 10 schools.
Kurt, go back one slide. The growth versus proficiency. Growth is a component, right, of that school proficiency profile.
Yes.
What's the difference between the growth and the school performance profile? And
They're using our PVAS calculations, if I'm correct. I'm gonna have to check on that, but they use the PVAS, how we are, when kids come in, PVAS is looking at kids come in to a grade level right here. How much are they growing throughout the grade level year over year? And if they can close the gap, it's gonna equal higher growth. And that's one thing our teachers do quite well. Our principals, when we were meeting with them, I had numerous bring up the fact they would love to, and some of them are actually going to do the data comparison, students that they have from K through 5th grade the entire time, and they want to track to see how they are doing. We have a lot of move-ins. Last year we had 800 families move in that were ESL students. Now, we had a net gain of 400 and some ESL students, so we had a lot of folks leave. So Chambersburg is pretty transient in that we have a lot of students that are coming and going. Stevens Elementary being probably our most transient building, that at the beginning of the year, if you take a look at how many would end the year, it's probably, at one point it was below 50% of the students that would start the year would end the year actually at Stevens.
So the school performance profile is a more comprehensive, combined benchmark where growth is a more specific component?
Yes, and these are going back to this slide again, this is what's calculated into making that score. I have a slide here just to talk a little bit about an update on AP data. In 22-23, we had 243 students that were enrolled in AP courses at Caches and CMS. 56 of those students scored a 3 or higher. AP exams 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 are what you earn. If you score a 3 or higher, that's considered pretty good. Most colleges that accept AP courses for credit, you have to score a 3 or higher to earn that credit. So 243 students in 22-23 went up to 270 in 23-24, and quite a few more students, higher percentage, scored a 3 or higher last year. So 72% of the kids scored a 3 or higher. So that's a really nice change in data for CMS and Caches. The IB data, there was 217 kids enrolled in courses in the previous year. 15 were in the diploma program. And this year that we're in now, 286 are enrolled in courses, and 2 more students, 17, are enrolled in the diploma program right now in the IB program.
I've got a question on the AP, just in general, do you have a sense for pre-pandemic kind of data, you know, because I'm looking at what happened 22, 23, and then there was this big improvement. So I was wondering, you know, how that happened and comparing it to what happened, you know, years and years ago, if you might have a sense for that.
I can get that answer for you because I have the data from pre-pandemic to now. I just chose to do the last 3 years. Quick summary. Actually, Chris has given a summary as well in his presentations. The middle schools have recovered quite well and actually are even showing signs of improvement. The elementary schools are still struggling, but we're almost there in the elementary schools. And the high schools, I would say our high school is actually probably performing still a little bit lower than where they were prior to COVID. But I do have that specific data for year over year.
Yeah, no big.
And the year prior to COVID was an excellent data year from pre. As you heard me say before, 10 of 17 schools, SPP, their school performance profile number improved. We have 4 buildings that are U.S. News and World Report winners. They're Guilford Hills. You heard Mr. Bigger say Hamilton Heights for the 2nd year in a row. That's quite an achievement. CAMS North and CAMS South. Of course, we'd love to recognize them at a board meeting like we did with Hamilton Heights last year. Scotland had the largest 1-year SPP improvement. It was close to 18 points. It's between 17 and 18 points, so that's quite a feat. Stevens. So you see, I'll talk a little bit about them under school improvement, but Stevens, the last 3 years, their SPP has increased each year, as well as their performance. So we're very happy with what's going on at Stevens, and they should be commended, and absolutely a celebration. CAMS North, South Hamilton, and Guilford have been 3 years in a row with an over 80 SPP, which is really difficult to maintain that number over 80 because once again, when you are high in growth, it's tough to keep growing those kids and show that you have exceeded what the state has expected for 1 year's of growth for a student. Moving to our schools under improvement, Caches, they're on the ATSI plan. Their focus is on attendance, of course, subgroup growth. That's what basically put them on ATSI is all their performance and graduation rates of their subgroups. On attendance, as you heard from the last presentation, they're looking at making some changes at both CMS and Caches, and of course with our reconfigurations. CMS is on school improvement with the state as well. Their focus is on ESL and special ed growth, and that's what placed them on the school improvement. Stevens was the only school that was not placed on by Pennsylvania, but they were placed on by the federal government for being what they call an underperforming school, being in the lowest 10% proficiency rate. But I look for them to, hopefully, if the trend continues, they're going to be off of that list as well. And when I gave the presentation on schools under school improvement with Dr. Long a few months ago, we talked about Buchanan. And Buchanan is on for ESL performance. And that data was from 2 years ago that placed them on it for this year. And if you remember, that was 7 to 9 students that actually got them placed on that school improvement. Over the last 2 years, though, we have seen increased scores with our students, our ESL students at Buchanan. So hopefully they're heading in the right direction, that they will be off of the state plan as well. So bringing it back, we're moving forward all in the right direction, from our blueprint to our feasibility committee to the presentations that you've seen, that we've talked about, schools of distinction, to even our goals for Mr. Bigger, myself, and Dr. Long, that we translate those goals with our principals, that they are looking they've set goals for 2030 in their performance, their annual review, as well as what their goals are this year to get themselves incrementally there by 2030 for a 10% improvement across the board. We are investing time on changing some schedules, devoting more time and resources to reading and writing and comprehending by 3rd grade. We are looking at ways to increase our math fluency by 5th grade. We're excited about the possibilities with our middle schools and the schedules and what we can do with that schedule to continue to see that we are exceeding what the state expects for us for growth. And with the changes that we're going to be making at the high school and also retaking of the Keystone exams, we hope to see that we can hit that 10% improvement as well in literature, algebra, and biology. In March, we will look at giving another presentation that will give you a mid-year performance update. What that'll look like, we'll look at Acadians and MAP and projected proficiencies and where we stand. A CASD dashboard on our goals and where we stand predicting and where they are set. And also, how do we use diagnostic data to drive our instruction? So we will have that for you in March. And I'll take any questions. I know we took some along the way, but I'd be glad to.
Yeah, I have one final question. How do you see block scheduling supporting, our performance metrics? Just curious about that.
I think if we do the right professional development with our folks, it could be a great benefit to our students. It'll allow time to focus. It'll allow time for, like in biology, to do more hands-on experiments. It just can't be teaching 2 lessons in 1 class. It has to be meaningful instruction that gets the kids doing more hands-on and more tactile learning. I think it can be a great benefit. I like that it aligns to CMS, it aligns to FCCTC, and it aligns to CASHES by going with the same schedule as well. Also look, some of the ancillary items that will be a benefit. I think that Mark said in some of his research, discipline generally goes quite down, attendance goes up, lateness to class, hopefully is wiped away, and kids can focus on instruction for periods of time. So I'm very much in support of the change.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say I was going through the data here, and the percentage of children reading by grade level based on the meeting metric criteria that's listed here still very much concerns me, and I know we are looking at how we can address that, but until we get that addressed, I mean, these numbers, when I see that a half a class is going on to the next grade level and they're not reading 1 grade level, we continue to have issues there and I know we're putting forth some efforts, but I really think it continues to, it's just a,
and the disparity between some of these elementary schools. Like, I knew that it existed, but to see Stevens, for example, 90% free and reduced, 35% ELL. And then you have other schools that have 44 free and reduced and 3.6% ELL. That's a totally different world. I mean, there's nothing comparable between them. And so I think it even further solidifies, and the hope is, I think, of the board, that we're moving in the right direction, trying to consolidate and have a more comparable experience for all of these kids that are at these elementary levels specifically. And seeing it in black and white with these data points just really drives that home. So I really appreciate all the effort that you and your staff did to present that to us, because I believe that we're making the right the right decision, but to see it and the numbers back that up in such a distinct way for me personally, I really appreciate the work that you put in to kind of go along with that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd also like to say too that this is very comprehensive, very easy to understand, and adding the Acadians in there and having multi-criteria to decide if a kid's on grade level, because you know there's variance that goes on with that depending on the testing date or whatever. I think it's very comprehensive, but it also points to where we have deficits that we've got to address. And of course, that that's a financial issue, but I think K-3 we've got to invest in getting these kids where they need to go. Plus, we're sending a whole group on that are struggling. So it's very difficult, but I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you. I know some of these sheets you spend hours, even days, just on one page, so to have a whole pile of it is pretty impressive. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I appreciate only 15 or so rather than 47.
First gave me a target. Appreciate you being good about it, too.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent Bicker. Concerning agenda item 807, you will be hiring 59 people for good-paying middle-class jobs tonight. None of you should vote no to these needed positions. I really don't think any of you won't vote no after hearing all of you speak tonight in a positive manner. Why? These people will help maintain Mrs. Jordan's Social Security into her aging years on this earth. That $2.6 million allocated in the 25-26 $201.6 million budget will cost me 1% in next year's budget. In dollars and cents based on my property assessment, that is $51.70 for 59 tax-paying people to be employed here. That's what all of us should want here, tax-paying people to be employed. I like nice things too. I like coming into any public building being proud of it. When a $170 million project is finally voted on, please be assured we all can cover this cost without hesitation to do so. I never left an area because I couldn't afford to live there. This is to you, Superintendent Bicker. And because you're on the agenda, I'm going to speak directly to you. Lastly, Superintendent Bicker, here's what I want from you. If Republican state lawmakers decide to push forward with attempting to end property taxes as a source of funding our public schools, I want you to roundtable with other superintendents in our state to stop this nonsense. You're a taxpayer too. You deserve to be paid out of property taxes, not some unknown state line item which may very likely not guarantee the dollars you deserve. These Republican state lawmakers may find out that they are on the losing end of this proposition too, if they are remotely successful in passing such a law. I know both Rob Kaufman and Doug Mastriano are on the losing end of the private business cyber charter schools to the tune of $8 million when our school budget was passed last year. That $8 million should be funding our schools, not someone else's school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jordan.
And you'll receive,
Dr. Wagner, please.
you'll receive this in email from me.
Well, good evening. I'm Dr. Dwight Wagner. I've been a resident at Penn National since 2008.
I think your microphone's off.
It's off? Okay. Is that it? It's got it on? Okay. As I was saying, I'm Dr. Dwight Wagner. I've been a resident of Penn National since 2008, and I spent my 33-year career as an educator with Prince George's County School System in a variety of administrative roles. More relevant to you, though, was I spent 34 years working with the Middle States Accreditation Association. And this organization, as you probably know, serves the District of Columbia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. So it covers quite a territory and a lot of schools and a lot of school systems. About 93, the organization acquired new leadership, and they began to focus on the whole matter of developing new protocols related to strategic planning, on the premise that if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And that, of course, is very relevant to what's happening with you folks at this time. You very wisely selected Mr. Bigger as your superintendent. I've known Mr. Bigger a number of years, and he's very capable. He understands the process. He's capable of providing excellent leadership in moving toward the process of strategic planning. Obviously, that's not something that has happened in the previous two administrations. And if you're standing still, in my opinion, you're in a process of failure. What you're doing now, and clearly indicated by what Mr. Wigman indicates in the slides, is you have a process going forth that lays out the roadwork for what you can do in terms of making real progress with improving your educational system. In the course of my career with working with Middle States, I visited over 60 schools in one capacity or another, so I've seen just about anything you can think of one way or another. I might add that we had the great pleasure of having Dr. Long graciously serve on two of our evaluations, and which turned out to be quite unique and interesting in their own right. I'm sure he could fill you in on that if you so choose. But the point is that you really are engaged in a worthwhile and significant process. And what we found at Middle States was that under the best schools that we found were a situation where you had strong leadership at the top and you had a very strong support by the board behind that leader to go forth. It's a challenging process. It can be difficult. It takes time, but it is the most important way to move ahead and achieve educational improvement for the students that you're serving within your system. So I want to congratulate you for what you've been doing and how you're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. I find it very exciting, frankly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to discuss on, comment on any agenda items? Okay. Nothing in old business. Moving on to the first consent agenda, the new items. We'll do a motion, or actually no, we're gonna go through these first, the way we've been doing it. We'll ask Mr. Bigger and any of the administrative team if there are any items between 7.01 to 7.07 that Mr. Bigger, you or your team would like to comment on.
Yeah, I think
These are items that were not discussed last week at our
I think Tammy can go over real quickly 7.04, just so you understand where that one's coming from a little bit. In short, Tammy.
Sure. 7.04 is a resolution that will allow for us to apply for the PA solar grants that recently came available through the Department of Economic and Community Development. We have the opportunity to, and we have been, Matt's here, and he can maybe elaborate a little bit if needed. We have already begun to investigate looking into potential solar projects. We're looking specifically at Fayetteville Elementary and Scotland Elementary. A lot of that came from the fact that the IRS changed the tax credit that was available for profit organizations is now also available for municipalities and governmental entities. So this will allow us just purely to apply. We are eligible for up to $400,000 for each project through this grant.
I think just to add to that, we would look at schools outside the borough. I had a privilege of seeing the borough's solar farm, where 25% of the energy in the borough is coming from solar or waste gases. So we would strategically target the schools outside the borough because they're already being funded by some solar projects.
Does it require any funding from the district?
There will be funding from the district, depending on what the project, basically, we would have to go through an assessment with an entity, I think it's called Generation 180, would come out and assess the buildings and determine what number of arrays we would need. But through the analysis, I think the one company that we looked at, there could be a return on the investment in 4 or 5 years, and then basically you're producing your energy at no cost. And it's gotten complicated. We're learning pretty quickly. There's also what they call SRACs, which if you don't utilize all your capacity, you can sell back. So there would be a profit and loss scenario.
So if we're putting out 400, if they're giving out 400,000, so we get
right.
that, what would that mean for the district as far as our initial cost to
Well,
invest?
we're not that far along. And this grant is due January 31st, so we have a very short window. There's no guarantee that we will apply and we will even get this. There's, I think, $25 million that was allocated through the state of Pennsylvania. There are 3 regions that are each going to get a little over $8 million that would get divvied out depending on how the projects come through.
I want to highlight Matt has been educating us. He's well-versed in this. We're learning as a group. He's well-versed in understanding the infrastructure is needed, whether it's a rooftop or in a field or anything. There's a lot of questions. We're in study phase. Okay. However, this opportunity came up, and we couldn't not at least try to see what we can do or not do. But we're not sold on selling our soul to solar. It has to be the right fit, the right place, the right location. So in the study phase, we're learning. So if you want to learn with us, we'll certainly provide you more information and documentation about this approach and or other approaches as we study them as well.
This is not a commitment to do the project. This is just more or less allowing us to go ahead and submit an application to the state so that if we do decide to move forward, we can access that funding.
That was it. That was the only one that stood out.
Board members, any questions, discussions on any specific items, 7.01 through 7.07? Okay, hearing none, then I guess I'll assume there's no item that any member would like to remove from the list and vote on separately. Okay, so do I have a motion for approval of items 7.01 through 7.07 as presented on the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gogler, second by Mrs. Gauss. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it and so moved. Our second consent agenda series, these items were previously discussed last week at our committee of the whole. So we'll provide an opportunity, but 8.01 through 8.13, any new information or additional highlights, Mr. Bigger?
Not from our view.
Board members, any questions, comments on any of the items 8.01 through 8.13?
Yeah, a question about 802. I'm just curious to know, like, when we think about should I ask the question now? Or?
No, no, yes,
Okay,
go
yeah.
ahead, yes.
Yeah, so as I see it, when I think about the presentation that we just received and improving our metrics there, do you feel like there is anything that we could do from a budgetary standpoint that would help us to better improve the growth that we see? Or do you feel like we're on track as is and this is a good...
I think for me, it's too soon to tell if we're going to get any state dollars.
Right.
To say if we're going to ask the local for any additional dollars. I think it's hard for us to receive 8.2 and then turn around and continue to ask our local residents for continued more. So I think there's a nice balance here.
Yeah.
And knowing more in the next couple months will be really helpful to know if we can extend some of our needs into some positions. So I'm not ready to commit or say anything, but it's a good topic. We are really early in our budget process, so I'm thankful for that we're starting this conversation really early.
Yeah. So from your end, you're just keeping a pulse on what's going on in Harrisburg, what you're hearing
That's
from
correct.
the governor and from the legislators.
The other thing you have to monitor for us and help us is don't over expect too much. We do have a bunch of positions. We have to get them hired, trained, implemented, and started. And that takes time, energy, and effort. So I want to make sure we do things well and implement them in quality and then revisit whether we have the capacity to continue to add or do something different. So there is a nice, great place we're at where we have resources and we can implement, but also let's make sure we can follow through.
Yeah, I've got a comment or two along those lines. So I continue to look at Mr. Bigger as being the belly button on the organization anybody can point to and say, this person is ultimately responsible for everything that goes on. And I like that idea.
Sure you do.
But I also respect that I've never run a school district. He has. I've never managed a budget of $190 million, $200 million. He has. And I know that probably before I can get an opportunity to, there'll be a lot of other people poking him if he fails in some way. And he's saying, and he said this when he first came on board, it's not about spending more money, it's about spending what we have wisely.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that too, but I'm also aware that many, many times I hear Dr. Diller say we need more blocking and tackling before kids get out of third grade, because we want them to succeed there. I listen to what we need in other areas, and I'm wondering, I'm being patient to allow those positions that we've already going to be proving here, get filled and see how it's working and make any adjustments, but we have the opportunity anytime we want as board members to say, no, Mr. Superintendent, we want more than what you're proposing, and we can do that. But right now, I'm saying I'm willing to be patient to let him guide this process thus far. And if I'm mistaken, I'll take the hit, I'll take the punishment later on, whatever that may be. But right now, I'm willing to be patient with this board and with this superintendent for the next year or so, see how things go.
I would like to add on, as far as the budget, I know you said it's kind of up in the air because you're not sure. And I know we had mentioned before about once we set it, it's set. You can't go up any higher, but you can come back down. If that's just your thought process on that, would it be advantageous to set it maybe the bar a little bit higher and then come back down knowing that, okay, we've got the money from, the government or whatever other sources. Your take on that?
So the vote tonight, item 801 and item 802 are tied together. Because we've accelerated this process, normally we wouldn't necessarily have to approve a proposed preliminary budget. The cap is still 5.3. Right now we're showing you a budget that has a slight deficit if we raise taxes to 2%. You still have the ability to go up or down until the final vote, which will be in June. So if, say, for example, something comes up in like March or April that we say, hey, you know what, we're going to put another $1 million of expense into this general fund budget, then I'm going to come back, he'll have conversation, and we may end up at 3% as our final. So we still have that ability.
So we're not locked, that was my, it's not locked, okay.
You're not locked in, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
just from a sheer number standpoint, all right, 802, proposed preliminary, two very key words, currently sits at 2%. 8.01 says we are willing to go up to 5.3. So
higher.
if the board, no higher than 5.3, yes, thank you, Mrs. Gogler. So as Mrs. Stauffer said, 801, 802, they're twins. So we're at 2% proposed preliminary, but the cap is 5.3. So there is room up or down.
The reason for the initial proposal listing a deficit is because you anticipate or you hope to find that money somewhere in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, I say this.
It's about.
Yeah, it's 453,000 or 458. I don't have my glasses on, but
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes, it's a balanced budget right now. So to come in and show you a preliminary that is at 3% or 4%, you're going to see a projected surplus. There's just not a need right now with the preliminary to come in with a higher estimate.
If you approve 10.01 and we begin the architectural contracts and we start our phasing of how we're going to move forward with facilities, that'll determine too the dollar amounts we'll need and when. And so you're balancing the facilities along with staffing at the same time. And we're committing to the grade configuration, so we are moving down that path a little faster as we've done the essential conditions and staffing to get us started. So there is this push-pull with both staffing and the buildings at the same time that are both financially heavy and burdensome on our budget. So I think you have to let that evolve through the spring, and we'll keep bringing you data and information. And, you know, is the 4 to 6 building first? Is Grandview first? Is the 7-8 school first? How much is it? What's our borrowing capacity? That sets the budget. And then you can come back to the staffing if the state gives us more money. So it is a little bit of a juggling act, and you just have to pay attention to all the big pieces. And we'll do that for you, and we will certainly let you know where we stand. And I've said this before, it's only a matter of how fast and how much we want to be able to do at one time.
Schools of distinction by 2028, you said, right?
Yeah, 2030, yeah, sure.
Mr. Rayber gets a bonus point because he quoted
Yes, it does.
Good one.
investment in schools of distinction by 2030, not a project.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Items 8.01 through 8.13. Okay, hearing none, ask for a motion and second to approve items 8.01 through 8.13, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Dr. Diller. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it and so moved. So we'll go to item 10.01. Mr. Rayber, as I said earlier, got a bonus point. We're not going to give you a demerit, Mr. Bigger. We're not going to put you in detention. I did spend some time in detention when I was in high school. But anyway, we're going to, facility feasibility study recommendation, investment in schools of distinction by 2030 recommendation. Please, Mr. Bigger.
Yeah, I think I've presented on this 35 times to the public. I don't know that I need to represent it, but we are recommending scenario 4, which has the grade configuration of K to 3, 4 to 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12, with certain focus areas within that targeted of our middle schools, our struggling infrastructure. We're out of space in elementary, and the need for additional programming at Career Tech and the Career Magnet School are our 3 big priorities when it comes to this feasibility study recommendation.
Okay. Questions? Or no, let's have a motion and second first, please.
Move to
10.01.
approve.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Gogler, second by Dr. Diller. Questions, discussions, board members?
I'm excited about a lot of this. You've heard me ask this before, but I think my biggest concern is the size of a potential 4 through 6, because I think the implications of this vote is that we end up with one building, would not entertain 2 or 3 building, And so we'd have a 4 through 6 building that is larger than our high school at a much earlier age. So my question is, as you've talked about this with your team, what are some of the strategies that you're hoping to implement to kind of ease some of that, and even for the public, for teachers or for parents that are concerned about the size? Can you kind of put our mind at ease with some of the things that you've been talking about as a team that you think could really help to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll look to the team I'll get started a little bit, but, from a person who's combined 2 smaller schools into a size of 900, where that community was worried about the size, the school opens and nobody cared. So I've seen it in a smaller scale. I will say the elementary schedule, grades 4 through 6, runs very contained, very narrow. It is not hit the button, and all the kids run around, all 2,100 of them just get to go wherever they want. They go across the hall to their other teacher. I think the most challenging part of the school will be parent pick up and drop off, and certainly your buses. But as far as the school day, I cannot emphasize enough that the self-contained approach of elementary schedules will be its approach. Now, we are entertaining ideas like looping. So you might just stay with your students. You get them in 4th grade, you educate them in 5th grade, you educate them in 6th grade. Very relational.
It's amazing.
And so we are exploring that idea. There are people that don't like that. There are people that do like that. So if we can make it feel small, we will. If we can design the building, which our architects will be tasked to do that, how can you make a building feel small when it's that large? And we already explored some other ideas. You saw the one in the study, if you did, it was like an E, really long hallways.
Yeah.
How about you put the central areas down the middle and have it go out each way?
Right.
350 a wing versus 700 in a wing. And maybe 3 stories versus 2 stories. So if we can start to create houses of staff and students in smaller segments and they stay in their area all day, I'm not sure you're going to notice.
Yeah.
So things you will gain, though, from the efficiencies of a larger building are your quality spaces, your ancillary spaces, your outdoor spaces, certainly your gyms, your cafeterias, your art rooms, your music rooms. Things that people take for granted here that they have in some buildings and not others. And when you have those, I cannot tell you how excited parents will be and staff will be to see those. So I think
a nice auditorium.
Yeah, when you see and look at all that, you go, okay, this is worth having the larger building for that. But if you know elementary teachers well, they will know their kids by name. They will know their situations by heart. That's the nature of an elementary teacher.
Yeah. Great response. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that, because I've been an advocate of, and I think this is a solution to that situation where we've had so many elementary schools with their own cultures, their own isolations in so many ways, and by the time they get together, they don't know one another. And this is an opportunity that when you have a 4 through 6 school assembly, they're all together, even if it's only for an hour, but they get to know one another. These aren't other people, they're my friends. So I think that is so important, because if you don't do it when kids are young, when they're our age, they don't get along.
And we can tell you the mascot in the 4 to 6 building will be a Trojan. Like that's, it's a conversation we talk about all the time when you're one town, one community, but you have a bunch of elementary schools, and I'm not criticizing that they all have their own mascots. That's the nature of an elementary school. But there is an important point when you're one Trojan, you're one town, and you're one community, and that'll start in 4th grade. So the rallying around that idea that I am a Trojan will start in 4th grade versus, 9th grade right now.
And I think, again, the 6th grade moving down to the elementary will be a big plus.
Yes, I agree.
It has been shown time after time. And it's really 3 schools in one.
Yeah.
At first I had maybe a concern, but then looking more, no. It's going to be here.
Yep.
And it'd be great if a teacher could stay with their kids all the time, because relationships is where it's all about.
Yep.
Most of us don't remember the subjects we were taught, but we remember the teacher that taught them.
That's right.
And influenced our lives.
Good comments, good questions. Great
great answers. Other questions, comments, discussion? All right. Sorry, Mrs. Stout. Yes, roll call vote, please. This is a $170 million investment in schools of distinction by 2030. Roll
Not-
call, please.
Not a problem. Dr. Diller,
Yes.
Mrs. Gogler,
Yes.
Ms. Gauss,
Yes.
Ms. Harbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Hayduck,
Yes.
Mr. McKee,
Yes.
Mr. Norcross,
Yes.
Mr. Raber,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Bring out the banner. Okay,
Work begins now.
and we are off.
Branding.
Great work, everyone. It is exciting, very exciting. Proud to be sitting in this seat while this is going on. Okay, item 13, new business, discussion only. As I said in the opening, this was my fault because I blew right through it a week ago at Committee of the Whole. So, new business, discussion only.
Yes, I have one item.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this school district has a lot of policies, and for 90% of them, it's up to Mr. Bigger. We could just say, hey, that policy needs a change, or take a look at it. He could say, Mark or Kurt, go and do whatever. But the one policy that is the board's responsibility is 000. And of the 10 policies underneath that big policy, the most recent update was in 2021. The other ones were like, some are as old as 2014. So all I'm suggesting is our policies are really, really old and obsolete. If they are to reflect what we do, then we should update them. And so I just ask that we consider putting together a committee for a short period of time to take a look at the policies, to make some recommendations to the board, and to fix the problem. Thank you.
Any other discussion, thoughts?
Having been on the policy committee prior to Mr. Bigger arriving on our change, we were in the process of looking at the dates and getting the older ones updated. We just didn't finish that process. So I agree that it needs to be done, but it was a goal of that committee a couple years ago.
In all fairness, we've been in flux for a while. Just saying.
Mr. Hayduck, under 000, are you recommending that we that we revise and take a look at all of them, or are there specific ones that stood out to you as being in need of attention?
There are certainly some that are in need of attention, ones that reflect, I think it's section 004. I'm not sure who's responsible for that, other than, it doesn't really specify, but some of those procedures are probably obsolete. We discussed a little earlier, just in passing, that most of these professional development courses are online. We don't have to seek approval from anyone here, or seek a budget request or any kind of a reimbursement for travel. That's probably not going to be the case in rare circumstances where someone goes to a convention somewhere outside or inside the state. One might consider, we have an election every year for board officers. If you're a newly elected board member and you walk into the meeting for the first time, you get sworn in, that day you're going to get sworn in, what do you know about any of the people that say they want to be a president or a vice president or any office? You don't know anything. We don't have an opportunity to state this is what our commitments were. That's what I like to hear what Ed said. Here are my priorities as a president. If every candidate would have an opportunity to express to the voting members this is what I believe in, this is where I want to have my priorities for the next year, that would give us an opportunity to make a more intelligent vote, I think. All I'm suggesting, that's another area you might consider. There's lots of opportunities there, but it is our policy. We can't say to Chris, fix our policy, can we?
Thank you. There's one thing I don't have to do. Appreciate that.
I'll let it go at that.
As Mrs. Gogler mentioned, previously, when we operated with individual committees versus a committee of the whole, there was a policy committee. I made the comment earlier with Mr. Whitman. I heard a great message on Sunday about living is changing. And we are changing and we are living. But if it's something the board would like to consider, we could do, Mr. Bigger and I were just whispering to one another, we could do an ad hoc committee if there were a subset of board members who wanted to be a policy committee. I was never on the policy committee before, but it was pretty much a lineup, I would say, that would come through from PASBO, that, hey, you know, policy XYZ are now coming forward for review. And one of the benefits of using, it's a very generic process, but the benefits of the generic process is we can trust it's been vetted. You know, a couple years ago, it was really heavy on changing pronouns, but that's what was happening a couple years ago. But it was vetted through, you know, legal and people, not just a group of community volunteers as we all are.
I would suggest you do the ad hoc specifically for the local procedures of the 0 section. We'll still take care of the remainder of them. Like Bev and myself are focused on policy, so if that would be a way I would approach it. That way the 0s have an end point to them, and it's not a permanent committee that just runs in forever. So you take those ones that are local board procedures, ad hoc on that one, and if 2 or 3 of you want to help put that together, that would be the way I think you should look at it.
And I'd be happy to nominate myself to volunteer to be on that committee, work with any other board members to get it done. And I would nominate Mrs. Gogler to come work with me, because I know we can work together to get it done. You're welcome, Mrs. Gogler. Merry Christmas.
You had a third self-nominated person.
When
Okay.
would you like to meet?
Well, what we will do at this
After Christmas.
what we will do at this point to keep the sequence that we like to follow, this will go on the committee of the whole agenda for next meeting. If anyone wants to think of it and wants to change their mind, or if anyone else wants to change their mind and make it 4 members, that's good. We could go to 4. We don't want 5, then we have issues with quorum. So if there were another member who wanted to be part of the committee, we could do 4.
So another one, I don't need to be in it. I'm happy to just back off and say.
Oh, you brought it up.
Oh,
You
no,
have
no,
to be in it. That's how that works.
Well, and even if a
Sorry,
policy
Professor.
does not need to be revised, it should have a review date. And so, you know, looking at some of these, they don't really need to be revised, but they need to be reviewed so that it reflects that we have looked at them and that we put our stamp on those policies as being still applicable.
Well, again,
Right.
For
But it should say
tonight,
review.
we will move this forward to committee of the whole. Mrs. Gogler, Mr. Haydock, if you want to put together a couple talking points for when we have it on our January committee of the whole meeting, we can really tune in a little closer, dive in, thoughts, ideas. Everyone will have, you know, a couple glasses of eggnog to think about it over the next couple days, and then we can discuss it again January cow and vote on it in January meeting.
Yep.
Any other new business items? Okay, 14.01, standard district enrollment summary for information only, is available. That meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.